Hi to all of my followers out there. Jesus told me that I'm long overdue for making a video, so I'm going to go ahead and make a video. A lot has happened since I last made an announcement type video. I've been working really hard on a movie that is about Laurie McBride's rape of Brent Spiner. And as you notice, I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat. I no longer need to wear this tinfoil hat because now that I am on Cerakquil, it is removing yeast toxin from my brain cells, and the Jesuits were using that yeast toxin to help them to misdirect my brain cell conversations and make it easier for them to take over some of my brain cell conversations so that I would get distracted and not stay focused on what I needed to focus on. So the way the Cerakquil works is it flushes toxins out of the brain cells, and because the toxins were remaining in my brain cells, I basically had yeast of the brain, which caused me to forget things, lose my concentration, and I'm still dealing with the yeast toxins in my bloodstream. I had such a serious yeast infection that Jesus had to do something drastic to help me. And he's choosing this method to heal me of my yeast infection, where he's using a human drug called Cerakquil, which takes toxins out of the brain cells. The reason that I couldn't get over the yeast, I have a systemic yeast infection. The reason I couldn't get over the yeast is because the yeast were camping out in my brain cells, and any yeast-killing medication I took, like nystatin, diflucan, didn't go inside the brain cells to deal with the yeast there. And that's where they were surviving. But Jesus has solved that problem by getting me on Cerakquil. So he actually took a situation where I was in the psychiatric hospital, and he turned it around to turn out to something good. When I was there, I couldn't eat my normal diet or take the supplements that I normally take. Jesus needed to get me Jesus needed to get me off of all of my supplements because there were ingredients in those supplements that were like yeast fertilizer. So he actually put me into that hospital to get me off of all of the supplements that I was taking. And I was taking quite a few, like multivitamins, CoQ10, stuff like that. So Jesus has informed me that all of those supplements, including the colloidal silver that I was taking, were all hurting my yeast infection. This germ is a Jesuit invention, and what the Jesuits did is they created a germ that feeds off its own toxins. So when the yeast died and released its toxins, that was yeast fertilizer. So every time I would take anything like nystatin or diflucan to kill it, I was feeding the infection. You might say, well, how can you get over an infection like that where you kill the germ and it releases its toxins and then that helps it to grow? There's only one way. You have to flush the yeast and its toxins out of the body without killing the organism or the germ. And that's what Cerakquil does. But because I have such a deep, heavy infection, it's going to take a while before Cerakquil is able to flush the yeast toxin out of my system. But that's when I went to the psych hospital, and I got there because a family member of mine wrote a lying statement about me, which the judge should have never let go through, but apparently the judge was tricked. And this lying statement, I'll just read you some portions of it. It says, she's exposed herself on the internet, which has attracted internet predators. They think Brent Spiner, Vladimir Putin, Matthew McConaughey are the internet predators, who have developed 3 additional websites: crazygail.com, orderofthejesuits.com, and churchofgail.com. This has been a favorite ploy of the Jesuits, where they try to make it appear that those 3 websites are all created by the same group. Crazygail.com is a Jesuit website. Brent Spiner and Vladimir Putin and the man I communicate with at churchofgail.com have nothing to do with that website. And the same for orderofthejesuits.com. But because the Jesuits want to take down crazy churchofgail.com and my website and my YouTube videos, they have to try to make it appear that my men are behind Crazy Gail and orderofthejesuits.com. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The only people who would believe that are idiots or wicked, because the personalities on those, the personality of the writer, the writing styles are so different. I mean, if you had half a brain and you went and looked at crazygail.com or orderofthejesuits.com, you can see that the writing style on orderofthejesuits.com and crazygail.com is totally different from the writing style at churchofgail.com or my website or my YouTube channel. So anyone who's dumb enough to think that I or my men would write crazygail.com or orderofthejesuits.com, I think they need to go to the psych ward. Either that or they're just lazy and they're not reading any of the sites and just making statements based on hearsay. Hearsay is what somebody else says. So I can assure you that churchofgail.com is different from Order of the Jesuits and crazygail.com. And Vladimir Putin is the one who created churchofgail.com. And then he and Brent Spiner, Matthew McConaughey, Gerard Butler, Hugh Jackman, they all, kind of came together when we first opened it up. And by the way, I talked to Keanu Reeves. That's the actor who stars in The Matrix. When I was on Skype with Brent a couple weeks ago, he popped up and said, I want to talk to Gail. I've been on her marriage list for so long. So he decided to talk to me. And I said, I'm ashamed to say this, Brent, but Keanu Reeves, he's an actor, right? I said, Keanu, I got to let you know I'm not really big into Hollywood. And this may seem hard to believe because I've got all these Hollywood stars on my marriage list. By the way, I really don't care about that marriage list. I don't care about that. Doesn't matter to me whether I have one or not. But the men seem to want to stay there, and so I let my men do whatever they want. That was their idea, not mine. But Keanu has been through a lot. And I noticed whenever I said things to him on Skype, he would stop me and say, Gail, he said, I really would rather not talk about this right now. And I noticed he seemed a little bit hypersensitive about some stuff. And not that he was rude or anything, but I could tell that he'd been through a trauma. I've had a lot of experience dealing with my men because the Jesuits love to rape my men. And they think that by raping my men, that they can alienate my men from me and that they would no longer desire me, which, as Brent Spiner has told me, is not true at all. Keanu Reeves has been raped by both Laurie McBride and Alina Kabaeva. For those of you who don't know who Alina Kabaeva is, she is the Russian woman, Olympic gymnast, I believe, that the Jesuits have launched. They had this massive media campaign to make it appear like Vladimir Putin has had an affair with Alina Kabaeva and has cheated on his wife, Ludmila Putin, which Jesuits have. Let me list the agents that are all Jesuits. Alina Kabaeva is a Jesuit. Ludmila Putin is a Jesuit. They even admit it at orderofthejesuits.com. Laurie McBride is a Jesuit, and Matthew McConaughey's wife, Camila Alves, is a Jesuit. She's not really his wife. She may be the wife of his clone. And let me just read more on here. Gail believes that I, her son, and other people are clones and that the real people have been kidnapped. What the Jesuits are doing here is they're taking something that is true and they're exaggerating it into a lie. And this statement was actually written by one of my family members who was like Judas Iscariot. It's just, I think Jesus Christ is very disappointed in this family member of mine right now. They're like Judas. Let me tell you one thing right now. I'm not even, right now, I do not believe that any of the family members that I'm dealing with are clones. In the past, I wasn't sure, and I might have appeared to have made a dogmatic statement that I thought they were clones, but I've never been 100% for sure whether they were clones or not. I get most of my intelligence from Brent Spiner, and Brent Spiner lets me know whether, using Vladimir Putin's nanotechnology research team, we go out and scan the cellular composition of these people, and by studying the genetic profile of the person, we can determine if they're a clone or what they are. And lately, we've determined that the trouble I've been having from my family members has not been from clones. However, there are some of my family members that do have clones, and it can get confusing trying to determine who is or is not a clone. But the main point that I'm trying to bring up here is I was taken against my will to a psychiatric hospital based on a lying statement written by a relative of mine who's like a Judas Iscariot. And I'm reading you the statement right here. When faced with reality or people who oppose her delusional thoughts, she accuses them of being clones. When is it against the law to believe something, like to believe in the existence of clones, when I'm not hurting anybody or I'm not hurting myself? First of all, I don't always do that. And I know that there were times when a family member would call me up and they were trying to run my life or control my life, and aggravated at them because they were behaving like a Jesuit supporter, I would accuse them of being a clone. But when I accuse somebody of being a clone, I never have been 100% certain whether they're a clone or not. It's hard to tell. I do believe in the existence of clones, but I don't always think that whenever I have a troublemaker relative that person's a clone, because it's not always the case. Sometimes they're being manipulated with brain control technology, or maybe they're just downright wicked in and of themselves, you know. So that's an untrue statement. It's a generalization. That tries to make it appear that every time I have problems with a relative, I think they're a clone, and that is not correct. She has written on her website that she has issued an execution order to kill the clone. I've written no such thing on my website. Chat room conversations by the impersonators. That's churchofgail.com. Their forum. Include plans to instruct Gail to run out into the middle of the street to meet Vladimir Putin, who is coming to rescue her in a space pod, and telling Gail if the police come to her door to run away because the police are coming to take her to the mental institution. That is an out-and-out lie. And my relative who wrote that is going to be accountable to God at the judgment for that. That's an out-and-out lie. I never believed any such thing. That would be the dumbest thing in the world to do. To out-and-out lie. Yes, and they took me to the psychiatric hospital based on the lies in this. Out-and-out lie. I am concerned about Gail's mental health, and have tried to talk to Gail about getting psychological help, but she becomes very angry, states she is not crazy, and calls me a clone. Okay. She does not answer my phone calls, and if I try to visit her, she becomes very hostile and threatening. Then she whited out the next section. What they did was they took statements that were true and exaggerated them to lies. And so I would say that 90% of what was in there is not correct. Besides, they don't have a legal basis to take me away against my will unless they can prove that I'm a threat to myself or someone else. Let me tell you something. I have never, ever been suicidal my entire life. Never. I rarely get depressed. I've never, ever, my entire life, ever thought about killing myself. As far as issuing an execution order to kill the clone, I don't do that. What I do is I let Vladimir Putin know that I'm having problems with certain people, and I let him decide what he wants to do about it. The one who does the executing is Vladimir Putin, not me. I would never be dumb enough to go out there and try to execute anybody. So I just thought I'd let you know that Actually, going to that psych hospital helped me out because I got on Cerakquil, and I am getting over my yeast infection, and this is a miracle. You got to understand, I have a very serious yeast infection. Vladimir Putin, I wanted to make a movie about him and his wife Larissa, and he started crying nonstop, and we couldn't get him to stop crying. And we found out later the reason why he wouldn't stop crying. When I asked him when I started asking him research questions so I could make a movie about the death of his wife Larissa, is that his wife did not die of breast cancer, like we thought in the spring of 2000. She died of the same yeast infection that I'm infected with. And because Vladimir maybe he thought it would be bad luck or something, he didn't want us to go into it. He didn't realize this until it was too late. One of the worst things you can do to a person if they have a systemic yeast infection is to put them on chemotherapy. And because the doctors goofed and thought she had breast cancer when she did not, they put her on chemotherapy and they killed her. Because the chemotherapy caused her yeast infection to go so rampant, they were not able to get the yeast under control, and she died. And that is how Vladimir Putin's wife, Larissa, died. I asked Vladimir, what was your wife like? Vladimir said she was a very sweet, submissive woman, which is not the way that Ludmila is. And right now I'm in the middle of making a movie for Brent, so I'm not sure if Vladimir's going to feel like having me make this movie for him, but I would like to do it because I think the world deserves to know the truth about Vladimir Putin. That this woman, Ludmila, that he's legally married to, and I believe he's legally married to her, is not the woman he married in 1983, like everybody thinks. And he had to take her because George W. Bush threatened war with Russia if he would not acquire Ludmila as his wife. And that's because Vladimir was in love with me, and the Jesuits find me a major threat. I would like to say something. Cerakquil is an antipsychotic, and I've been on it for a month now. In fact, that's why I'm so stuffed up, because it makes you really stuffy. What I believe it's doing in my body is it's going to my brain cells, clearing out the toxins out of my brain cells, and clearing the yeast toxin out. And because I'm allergic to yeast toxin, that's why I'm so stuffed up. Oh. But I'm really excited about one thing. When a person has a serious yeast infection like I've had for years, they develop all sorts of food allergies. I was allergic to milk, wheat, chicken. About the only thing I could eat was rice as a grain, no other grains. And I couldn't have any meats. None of them agreed with me. I had to basically go vegetarian, no bird products. Well, since I started the Cerakquil, and since I've stopped the supplements, I can now eat all the grains. I even can eat some chicken, a little bit. I used to have a terrible allergy to chicken. I'm able to eat wheat. I'm able to tolerate gluten. I'm healing from the yeast infection. The Cerakquil is healing my yeast. So Jesus told me, I had a Skype conversation with him. The way the Skype conversation works with Jesus is sometimes I'll be talking to Brent Spiner on Skype, and Brent types on Skype when we communicate, and then Jesus just shows up, and then Brent types what he says. Jesus will not meet with me face to face because Zach Knight wants to impersonate him, and Zach Knight wants to seduce me again. So that's why Jesus won't do it, though he will meet with my men. We have a new Church of Gail, too. And this Church of Gail is really fantastic. If you go to my website at gabrielchana.com/church.html, you'll see the video that Brent made about this new Church of Gail. And what's really interesting is Terrance Jenkins was taking a tour of rooms inside the church with the head of Mensa. That's for people who are super geniuses. And as he was going from room to room, they discovered a room with a machine that measures a person's IQ long distance. Well, they were just playing around and having fun, so they decided to measure my IQ And they said they couldn't believe it. According to this machine, my IQ was so high it was off the charts. They said I had a special kind of intelligence that is so high it's off the charts, and they determined from this machine that I am the most intelligent woman on planet Earth. I have to admit, I'm having a hard time believing this, but this is what Terrance told me. And I have an exact quote of the statement that Terrance made, or that Terrance wrote me about this at Church of Gail. GabrielChana.com/church.html. You may say, why aren't you wearing your tinfoil hat anymore? The only reason I had to wear the tinfoil hat is because I had yeast of the brain, which means all of my brain cells were loaded with yeast toxin. And the Jesuits were able to direct my brain cell conversations using the yeast toxin as a catalyst. And so now that I've cleared most of the yeast toxin out of my brain because I've been on Cerakquil for a month, the Jesuits no longer are able to use the yeast toxin in my brain as a catalyst to help them direct my brain cell conversations. So Jesus told me I no longer need to wear the tinfoil hat because I'm on Cerakquil. Because the level of yeast toxin in my brain cells has really gone down. So now the Jesuits can't use that as a catalyst to misdirect my brain cell conversations. But I'm really ashamed to say that statement, that lying statement that got me involuntarily committed to the psych hospital, was written by a relative who was working hand in hand with Lori McBride. Brent Spiner has informed me of this. It's just really sad. Really, really sad. Because Lori McBride is a murderer. Even though the Jesuits have doctored up her photos to make her appear to be a normal, sane, sexually attractive woman, Brent Spiner informs me that her real appearance is that of a vicious, vulgar, and bitchy woman. That's what he said. Brent Spiner, when he described Lori McBride to me, he just said she's a real bitch. That's how he describes her. He said that's just the best way to describe her. And if you want to hear what the real Lori McBride is like, go to Terrance Jenkins' YouTube channel, TerranceJenkins, and listen to the Skype recordings of her voice. And that's the real Lori McBride. And then go listen to that Skype recording of that woman's voice that you hear, who claims she's Lori McBride, and then look at the pictures of Lori McBride on the internet. Two different women. You may say, well, maybe that's not the real Lori McBride. That was the real Lori McBride. Brent Spiner was at that trial. She actually did a partial switch out with him where his penis and his torso and his head was him. And then the Jesuits were able to do a partial switch out where they could get a clone of Brent's to take over the hip muscles, the legs, and the arms, so that they were able to manipulate Brent to have sex with Lori McBride right during the trial against his will by using a partial switch out technology. They did this using his clone. I say, oh, you're crazy. That stuff is, like I said, maybe the reason I appear crazy is because I'm a super genius. And I'm just light years ahead of some of you all out there listening to me. Anyways, I think I've covered the main stuff. I just wanted to mention that we've got a new Church of Gail. It's fantastic. Go see the video on it at churchofgail.com/church.html. I'm explaining to you why Jesus allowed me to go to the psych hospital. A little bit about a trial. We just had a legal case for a trial where my family members were trying to shut down my website and my YouTube channel, claiming that because I'm crazy, I don't have the right to speak. But Brent and Terrence stuck up for me during the trial, and the judge said she's not crazy and she's entitled to her freedom of speech. I have the same beliefs now on Cerakquil that I had before I was on Cerakquil. The only thing Cerakquil is doing for me is it's removing yeast toxin from my brain cells. And the yeast toxin may have caused me to get a little bit off balance, where I might have obsessed a little bit more about some things than I should have. But they never made me insane. They just made me off balance. But not off balance to the point where I was a threat to myself or anyone else. Okay, I think I've talked to them. Oh, by the way, Keanu Reeves, I met him on Skype. He has been through so much trauma, that guy. He was talking about how Laurie McBride raped him. And she is I've made a movie about this, so just go watch my Brent Spiner movie at gabrielchana.com/church.html, and I will continue to work on that movie. That states it better than anything I could say in words. But when I started typing in Russian at Church of Gail, he said, "Please, Gail, don't talk to me in Russian. I can't take it." And we found out later it's because he was raped by Alina Kabeva, Jesuit, that Jesuit woman who claims to be Vladimir Putin's mistress, which is a bunch of baloney. Okay, I think I've hit the main stuff. And sorry about neglecting you all. Most people do not think I'm crazy. Oh, one more thing. I want to thank my fan at Amazon.com who wrote a glowing review of my novel, Silver Skies. She said that in her country, I am the most popular and well-known writer, and that I'm very well respected. I believe that country is Russia. So I've got a Russian reviewer up at Amazon.com who's written a really nice review of my novel. She said that her school children have tried to send me letters to let me know how much they appreciate my book, but the Jesuits have blocked those letters from reaching me. But there's apparently a whole country out there that thinks that I'm the most awesome writer, according to this fan. And you know what's really funny? These Jesuits are so good at keeping my writing money from me. Though even though I know that my novel has already been made into a motion picture, but the Jesuits have kept it from going mainstream by bombings and committing murders. And by the way, that Pulitzer Prize that I won a Pulitzer Prize for one of the videos I made here. My men tell me that the Pulitzer Prize people tried to get that. It's like $10,000 award. They tried to get the award to me, but the Jesuits kept blowing up all the trucks that were delivering the money to my bank. So they couldn't do it. Jesuits do this all the time. I've made a ton of money from my writing, and they always either blow up a bank or they blow up the armored car that's bringing the money, and they keep the money from me. But I actually had one of my fans tell me that in her country, Russia, I am the most well-known and popular writer. And yet, you know how much money I've made from my writings? And since they started, about $40. $40! And I'm the most popular writer in Russia. You think maybe she's lying. No, she's telling the truth. But I'm up against the most powerful organization on the planet. Let me tell you how good these Jesuits are. I had an air conditioning unit outside of my wall that was making this loud humming noise. It was going like, ooh. And I called to my apartment complex to complain about it. And I said, we don't hear any noise. We think you're crazy. And I said, I wrote Vladimir Putin and Brent Spiner about this. I said, I don't get it. They're doing all sorts of things to that unit, strapping it down, tightening the screws, and I keep hearing this noise from the unit, but my apartment management doesn't hear it. They say there's no problem with my air conditioning, that I'm crazy. Vladimir Putin said the Jesuits put something inside that unit that only I could hear and nobody else. And they did it on purpose to just drive me crazy with that noise, which was waking me up from my sleep. But they made it so that I was the only one who could hear it. This is the technology, the futuristic technology the Jesuits have. And if they're that good that they can do stuff like this, and that they can cause Brent Spiner to have sex against his will with Laurie McBride, the woman who raped him and tried to kill him in the courtroom, you can see why it's possible to be a very popular or even Nobel Prize or Pulitzer Prize winning author and not get your money. I am up against the richest and most powerful organization on earth. Anyways, I don't write for money. I write for Jesus, so I just leave the results with him. But this Russian woman who praised my novel said she felt that my book was, or I think it was a woman. I'm not sure. It might have been a man. I don't know. But I believe they were from Russia, even though they said, I believe they were a Russian living in the United States. She said that she felt my book was the most important book outside of the Bible that was ever written by any human being. I had another reviewer who basically said the same thing. The people who are giving me negative reviews, I can tell, have not read my book. I can tell. All I can say is shame on them for reviewing my book without reading it. So, anyways, I better go now. I just had a lot to cover. This is a long video. Jesus Christ himself told me that Silver Skies is a prophecy and that he inspired it. And I think I did a good job. Like I said, they've already made a feature film. Steven Spielberg was behind it. But Jesuits have kept that from going mainstream. Like I said, they're good. They were able to cause Brent to have sex against his will during the Quebec trial, and they were able to get me to hear a noise from my air conditioner unit that only I could hear and nobody else. By the way, Vladimir Putin fixed the problem. The noises stopped. And they have all this futuristic technology. They can stop me from getting the money. Well, when Jesus wants me to get my writing money, I'll get it. And then I actually heard from somebody who reviewed my novel that I am the most popular and respected writer in her country of Russia. She didn't say Russia. I'm assuming it was a she. But I'm pretty sure it was Russia. Because Vladimir Putin is my man. And he's the Russian head of state.